righty, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're calling this the RAV Podcast Season 2. Season 1 was done all the way back in 2020, pre-COVID, and we are back. We're going to bring on some of the same guests that we've had in the past. We're going to bring on new guests, but nonetheless, just a quick shout out to everybody at SportsE, Eric, Scott, Chris, and Julian for allowing me to come on and continue sharing the message that it's not just 1 in 5 people that struggle, it's 5 in 5. We all go through our different storms and our different battles. And I'm just here to continue these organic and authentic conversations to get people around the world, the people that tune in, that subscribe, that like, that follow, that share this podcast, to again create some normalcy around the fact that we are all human. We have emotions, we have feelings. They're called feelings for a reason because they're meant to be felt. So anyhow, thank you to everybody for tuning back into the RAV podcast. And I look forward to this season with y'all. Anyhow, that's going to be it in regards to the introduction. I wanted to kind of have this first episode here be more of a refresh in regards to myself and my mental health journey and my story of, growing up with childhood abuse, a dysfunctional family that I know so many families out there are dysfunctional as well. But I think there's a lot of healing that can be done around that boundary setting, self-respect, self-love, to not allow you to be the repeater in the generational cycle. It's about stepping outside of that, healing the parts of you that are attached to family. We love family, yes, but there is a lot of dysfunction and there's a lot of healing that needs to take place within that. So anyhow, as a refresher here, no idea how long this episode's going to go, but it's going to be perfect. And so, I'll just dive right in real quick. Me in a nutshell, I'm a father of 2 beautiful children, Harper and Nash. My daughter, Harper, such an angel. I really found out what love was all about the day that she was born. It has created a deeper sense of love, unconditional love. And then when my son, Nash, came, he is 8 years old. It got me to understand at an even deeper level, acceptance, that we are not all the same. My daughter was an angel, easy in regards to parenting, in regards to sleep and food. And then my son came along and he was different. And I wanted him to be just the same as her. But I realized, no, I need to accept him, love him exactly where he's at. And now he and I have an incredible connection. All 3 of us do. I call us the tripod. Outside of that, that's my first love. Now it's all about mental health advocacy, sharing my story to help others. I think all too often in this space, you hear people saying that if I can just help one person, I would be happy. I'm here to call those people out. We don't want to just help one person. We want to help the masses. And that's what I'm here to do, to continue, again, putting myself in that seat of vulnerability. It's such a powerful place to be, to, again, try and help hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, because I know so many people tune into podcasts. And prior to that, I'm a former professional hockey player. Played the great game of hockey professionally. I'm so grateful for those experiences for 10 years in total. Signed an entry-level contract with the Anaheim Ducks after my freshman season at Northeastern University in downtown Boston. It was then that I realized how much I lacked in regards to mental ability, mental stamina. We all have mental strength, but what I lacked was mental stamina, my ability to continue showing up in the face of adversity. And I realized very quickly that is what held me back. But I'm at peace with it all, knowing that I was never going to have a career in the NHL. I was always going to sign that NHL contract to create a platform for myself, because in this crazy world we live in, people that are athletes, people are more willing to listen to them as if they're different than us. But I'm here to remind you guys that I am no different than you. I had a particular skill set that I worked on, no different than people in sales in the business world. Y'all have a skill set that I don't have. If I went into your arena, into your field, you would dominate me. No different if you came into mine, I would dominate you. But we're not here to talk about dominating. And now, again, I'll bring it all the way back to my childhood. So I was born in Mesa, Arizona, September 22nd, 1988. Shortly after that, my family and I moved up to Leduc, Alberta, where my younger sister, Sarah, was born just 11 months later. Shout out to Sarah. We are Irish twins, both born in the month of September. And we lived there for roughly 3-4 years. And to be closer to my father's mother, my grandma's illness, is what eventually brought us down to deep in the desert in California. The town I grew up in is rated, or was rated, I don't know where it's rated now, but a couple years ago, it was rated the 4th worst city in all of California. And we all know how massive California is. It is a massive state with an abundance of cities, and I come from the fourth worst. So thank you, parents, for moving us there. But I'm grateful now. Again, everything serves a purpose. And shortly after moving to California, my mother's brother passed away. My uncle passed away, and leaving behind three children and his wife. His wife, unfortunately, was not necessarily fit to even be a mother at all, let alone a single parent. And so my parents made the decision to adopt my three cousins, not knowing what they had experienced in their lives. The only way you know what people go through is by asking questions. And it's not as simple as asking the questions. It's if that person is willing to be vulnerable and open up and share with you the things that they've gone through. So nonetheless, none of that took place. So we brought in our three cousins. So three cousins. I've got two brothers and two sisters. So now we got 8 kids and then mom and dad. And it was shortly after bringing them into our family that things started coming to light, so to speak, but not consciously. It was all obviously unconscious. Sexual abuse started taking place in the house that I grew up in. I began getting sexually abused by the eldest of my three cousins that we adopted. And it went on from the ages of 5 to 7. I know that's heavy. So, for anybody out there that's listening, if you don't want to absorb the heaviness, the heavy energy, I highly suggest you place your tongue on the roof of your mouth and, as best as you can, breathe deep into your belly. That's how we as humans can protect our energy. So, if you don't want to absorb this, just observe, tune into your breath, and then you don't have to be, quote unquote, a victim to the energy that's coming out and into this microphone. So, again, from the ages of 5 to 7, I was sexually abused, and it was obviously tough. I didn't really understand what was going on back then. I was so young. My cousin that was abusing me, I viewed as a monster. He was 16, 17 years old, very tall. And I'll never forget, this is vivid. This is with me. It'll be entrenched in my psyche for the rest of my life. I remember sharing with him that if he didn't stop doing to me the things that he was doing, that I was going to go and tell my parents. And I'll never forget the way he responded, because the way he responded put fear into my mind. It put fear into my heart, which ultimately led me from not telling my parents. It ultimately led me into playing the great game of hockey from such a timid place. And I'll get to that story later. But what he said to me, he said, Jake, I go by Jacob now, by the way, not Jake. He said, Jake, if you go and do that, if you go and tell your parents what I've been doing to you, I'm going to beat you up. And when he said that, as a 6-year-old, as a 7-year-old, I took that as real. I took that as truth. And that fear, again, that he put into my mind led me to never saying anything. And I'll remember so vividly he being down, sitting on the couch in the living room. I was walking up the steps, my childhood home, and in between each step, you can see through. And so I could look into the living room, and I was deadlocked on him. And the fear that I felt, the tension that was going on in my mind that led to tension in my body, I was like shaking, walking up those steps, looking at him, thinking, if I go and do this, that monster right there is going to beat me up. And again, I was 10 feet away from my parents. And had I just had the courage, 10 seconds of courage, but I didn't know back then. You don't know what you don't know. I'm grateful that I know now. But then I was 10 seconds, I was 10 feet away from putting an end to the deeply rooted abuse that I went through as a child. So ultimately, I didn't say anything. And then the abuse just continued over and over and over again. I don't recall how many times it took place within those 2 years, but what I do know is that from the ages of 0 until about 7, 8 years old, and then even into our teenage life, but those first 7 to 8 years are the most formidable years of our minds, of the subconscious mind. It's when our subconscious mind is the most aware. Our brain waves are operating at those times at a theta frequency. If you're new to that type of talk, everything is frequency, everything is energy. The first 20 minutes that you're awake is you're in a theta frequency. Unless you go and pick up your phone, it takes you out of that. But again, the first 20 minutes and as you're drifting off to sleep is when your subconscious mind is the most aware. So that's such a powerful times to reprogram the subconscious mind. But those first 7 years, I know I'm getting scattered here. Deep breath, because I know I'm talking very quickly here. So we'll just slow down here a little bit. Those first 7 to 8 years, again, are when your subconscious mind is being programmed. your inner roommate is being programmed. We have unconscious thoughts that are going on all day long. And so many of those thoughts as an adult and as a teenager are actually deeply connected and deeply rooted in those first 7 years. So, how you were spoken to by your parents, by your brothers, by your closest caretakers, their voices penetrated your mind, and then eventually their voice became your voice, meaning it's going on in your mind. But I need people to deeply understand and believe that the thoughts that are going on all day long that you are not producing yourself, that is other people's voices. And there's a way to reprogram that. There's a way to not attach to those negative thoughts. Attaching your focus, that is your awareness, to one thought leads to a cycle of a negative loop, negative thought patterns. And if you don't know that you have the power to get out of that, to create your own thinking, we all have that power. We all have that ability. Too many people don't understand that. And if you aren't aware of that, therefore you're not stopping them. You're a victim to everything that you're actually not. So I know I've gotten away a little bit from the childhood stuff, but again, those first 7 years, guys, in a lot of ways set you up for the rest of your life. That's why it's so important for us as adults, especially as parents, to be reprogramming, to be introspective, self-analyzing ourselves and understanding, where does our anger come from? Where does the sadness come from? Where does this voice in our mind, the inner roommate, where does that all come from? And all of it, in my opinion, is directly connected to our childhood. So again, going back to the abuse, that fear that he put into me is fear that I lived with for such a long time. Now I'll transition into, my life as a hockey player. I started playing the game of hockey at the age of 4. And where I grew up in California, there was no ice hockey, or there was, but the closest ice rink was an hour to an hour and 15 minutes away. So we started out in roller hockey, and thankfully we had 2 roller hockey rinks in my hometown. So we got to play. My family actually co-owned one of them. So school was essentially an afterthought. It was, how can I convince my parents to let me stay home? Maybe I'll vacuum the whole house, which will take me an hour. And then the rest of the day, I'm at the roller rink working on my skills, working on a passion, working on a love. And then eventually we made the switch over to ice once ice hockey began gaining in popularity in California. So I played in a town called Riverside, California. That's the rink that I grew up playing at. And eventually, at the age of 15, the ripe young age of 15, when I was experiencing a heightened level of depression, that's when I moved away for the first time. I moved away to a city about 20, 30 minutes outside of Portland, Oregon, to play junior B hockey. And again, like I said, that was at the height of the depression that I experienced. I don't like to say my depression or my anxiety as if it's something that I possess, that I can take out of my pockets and offer it to you. It wasn't mine. The anxiety isn't yours. These are things that we experience. So changing the wordage, the verbiage around those things really helps people to create some disconnect, detach a little bit from the emotion that comes behind those words, my depression, my anxiety. If you can switch it to the anxiety or the anxiousness that I'm experiencing, or the depression that I'm experiencing, it is so powerful for us to, again, just create a little bit of detachment from those feelings. So 15 years old, moved away from home, playing the great game of hockey with now 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, guys that were huge, much bigger than I. And I remember when once fighting became an option in the game, because every league that I had played in up until that point, there was no fighting. It was just the physicality of the sport, which still brought a little bit of fear. I was always an offensive defenseman, a finesse player. I was told that I'm a fine piece of china out there. I played the game very timid, but I was still able to operate at high levels to get myself to an NHL contract. But that year, once the fighting was an option, that's when my inner child, inner little 5-year-old Jake, started coming to the surface anytime there was any type of confrontation on the ice or in the gym or in the classroom or in the locker room. What would happen is, if there was some type of confrontation in a practice between me and a teammates, or in a game between me and an opponent, I was triggered, and my fight or flight mode kicked off. But there's another one, it's called freeze. And that's what I did. If somebody pushed me or somebody started talking crap to me, I would freeze and I would just blank stare them right in their eyes, not saying a word. I couldn't move. And the most unfortunate part about those times is I had no idea where this was coming from. Our minds are so powerful. Ultimately, the subconscious, all it wants to do is keep you safe. It wants to protect you. So, thank you to the subconscious. I'm not trying to fight the subconscious anymore. I'm not trying to fight the ego any longer. I'm trying to invite it in to understand it better, to understand where so many of my fears and insecurities come from. And if I can get to the root, then me as the 35-year-old Jacob doesn't have to mess around so much with these surface level feelings. So now again, in those stages, the 15-year-old, 16-year-old me, again, I played the game with such fear. And it's that fear that continued to stay with me. And because I wasn't receiving any type of mental health help by a therapist at those times, these situations, these scenarios continued to pop up and pop up and pop up. And what it ultimately led to, guys, was hockey no longer being an escape for me. It used to be a place where I could go and escape and express myself and allow the art of the game to show. That's how I expressed myself. I was very good. Obviously, I worked hard on my skill set, but I was a good player. I was the go to guy on essentially every team I played on until I got to the NHL level. But again, that fear didn't allow me to fully play to my highest level. It didn't allow me to play the physical game of hockey from a physical standpoint. And again, anytime there was a fight in the game, I became a shell of myself. And I bring this up because I know there's so many people out there that experience this same type of triggers where they're triggered into their inner child. And that's again what I was experiencing. And I want people to know that there's a way to get out of that, that there is healing for us all. I went through 3 years of intense talk therapy that was very powerful for me. It really helped me to understand where all of my fears in life came from. And it was, again, all deeply rooted in the sexual abuse that I was experiencing. And not just the abuse, but again, those words spoken to me from the abuser. And again, I know there's so many people that experience this, and perhaps people are lost. They don't know what to do. The first thing to do is speak, to talk, to engage in conversation with people you trust. You don't just share this information with anybody because not everybody is able to receive it, and not everybody is able to hold space for you to freely express your emotions, your feelings, the things that trouble you, the things that make you sad, that make you angry, that make you cry, right? If you share with the wrong person, right, and they try and shut you down because you experiencing emotion and now sharing that emotion triggers them into feeling something, because they don't know how to manage themselves, they don't know how to manage their inner storm, they may, in most cases, have to shut you down, use you as a co regulator for their own nervous system, right? So they're denying your reality because they can't accept their own, right? And if you're doing that for the first time and that's the first person that you ever do it with, and because they shut you down, it might teach you that we can't trust just anybody. Yes, obviously, but it might shut you off from ever wanting to speak again. So you got to make sure that who you're about to share your stuff with, your baggage with, your reality with, we need to make sure that this is a person that can hold space for you, not just safe or not just space, excuse me, but safe space. We need a safe space. And when I say safe space, what I mean by that is this person ultimately going to be able to, again, manage themselves in the face of this energy that's coming out of me? Because as I said earlier, everything is energy. Our thoughts, our words, our actions, our choices, our habits, it's all energy, and our realities are being created with that energy. So again, if that person's not able to regulate themselves as you're sharing, at some point their own stuff is going to come up, and now they're going to see you from the lens of their own inner disturbance. That is not a safe space. So again, there are people out there, and I would highly suggest anybody to find a couple different people. And I think for so many people, the issue is the stigma out there. I know that word gets thrown out a lot. It's just everybody perceives it as weakness. It's one thing for women to open up. It's actually quite common for women to do that. But when it comes to men, It's far more difficult for men to open up, to share, because this society has deemed it as weakness. Vulnerability is weakness. Crying is weakness. But I ensure all listeners out there that there is nothing more challenging that I have done in my healing journey than giving myself permission to cry. It is a challenge. It is such a challenge, but it takes true strength. That is not weakness whatsoever. And I also ensure the listeners out there that if you do finally just give yourself permission to cry, you'll cry. And guess what? Those tears coming down, what is that? That's energy that has been built up within inside you that is you are now giving permission. You're giving space to get out of you. And every single time after the crying is done, oh, this emotional weight is just taken off of you. You literally will feel lighter. You'll feel lighter mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. You'll feel lighter. And then you'll realize, wow, that actually wasn't so hard. All of these stories that are going on out there about this type of stuff have all been a lie. It's not weakness. And who doesn't want to feel emotionally lighter? I think we all do. We just have to overcome the inner dialogue that's taking place once we're on the cusp. We're so close to letting those tears come. But because as kids, we were always told, don't cry, stop crying, we were programmed to think that crying is bad. It's not bad. It's a normal human emotion. We need to do more of it. Deep breath. I hope everybody that's listening is doing well with this information. I know there's some powerful information out there. And obviously, within that last 10, 15, 20-minute blast off I had there, so perhaps you can use some of those tools. And again, once you're on the cusp there of the tears coming, you just close your eyes and affirm in your mind, I give myself permission to release this. I give myself permission to release what isn't mine to carry. You don't have to carry that weight any longer. So I'll go back now to the hockey. As I said, I moved away from home at the age of 15. And that's really when I began to understand that I had a lot of skill. I had a work ethic, and then I realized, man, I can do something with this. I can take this somewhere. And eventually would move on to move to Texas, just outside Dallas, in a town called Frisco. And that was when the depression kicked in even more for myself. And I was then introduced to alcohol. I grew up in an alcoholic family, so I experienced it. And that's why, really quick, parents, we got to normalize not drinking in front of our kids. We've got to normalize not drinking in front of our kids. We all know it's bad. We do. But we continue this cycle of drinking in front of them. And what do you think they're going to do when they get older? That's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to do what they see. We all always get caught, oh, don't drink, don't do this, don't do this. But then you're the example and they're going to follow what you do, not what you say. So again, let's normalize not drinking in front of our kids. That year in Texas, what I didn't know going into that season is the reputation that this team had. This team had the reputation of a party lifestyle, a lot of cocaine use, marijuana use, partying all the time. And so I got into that, and I was introduced to, again, to alcohol, to marijuana, to a little bit of fame, a little bit of popularity in this town that I know has exploded since those years back in 2006. Frisco, Texas, I can't imagine what it looks like now, but back then the Texas Tornado was a powerhouse team in that league, in the North American Hockey League, and it was very popular in that city. So again, I got introduced to alcohol, marijuana, chewing tobacco, and women, and this party lifestyle. And then it became very evident, not to me at the time, it's very evident to me now, that I myself, maybe I was probably an alcoholic. I abused it like crazy, 5 nights a week. We'd play Friday, Saturdays, Saturday night after the games, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. I drank every single time. And my intent unconsciously was to black out every single time. And on most nights, I succeeded at doing that. And then I would, quote unquote, recover on Thursday and then go and perform again Fridays and Saturdays. So I was performing all over the place. I was performing at the rink and I was performing away from the rink. And I realize now so much of the performance away from the rink is because I was caught and I was lost in people pleasing. I was trying to please my cousin as a child, and that bled into my teenage life and into my adult life, my early adult life, that I gained so much inner happiness if the people outside of me were happy with me. And what that ultimately led me to doing so many different times. That's not the main culprit. It's never just one thing, it's a lot of things. But this one, if somebody asked me, Newts, what are you doing tonight? That right there told me, oh, they want to know what I'm doing. That made me feel good. For a kid that was lost internally, that created some happiness. And so I would go and I would participate in the drinking all the time. And then that bled into the next season, now playing in Lincoln, Nebraska in the USHL. One of the best, if not the best, junior hockey leagues in North America. It's certainly in America, it's number one. And the biggest enabler for me, guys, was the fact that I was still performing on the ice at such a high level. And with that, again, I said the biggest enabler because then I didn't see that there was anything wrong with what I was doing because I was still going out. I was still the go to guy. I was still the top pairing defenseman. I was still on the first power play. I was still getting scouted by the NHL, by Division One teams. So again, I didn't feel like nothing's wrong. I can go and live this crazy life away from the rink and then show up and still be that guy. I'm on top of the world. I don't need anything else. I don't need to work on myself, right? And then I went to Northeastern after 2 years in the USHL in Lincoln, Nebraska. I went to Northeastern and it slowed down a little bit. But what increased those years was the marijuana use. I would experience emotions, I would experience pain mentally and physically and in my heart. And because for so long I was always told to don't cry, suck it up, move on, let it go, what I wasn't taught and what so many people haven't been taught is that it's okay to just feel these emotions. Instead of shutting down yourself, your own emotions, just give yourself 5 minutes to just feel it. So now here I am at Northeastern and in Lincoln and in Texas, and these emotions would start coming up. And all I knew how to do was to shut them off. I have to suppress, I have to distract myself from myself, right? And so it would always lead to the alcohol because, again, that was my example. Marijuana was my example. Chewing tobacco was my example. And then again, I got lost in hookup culture. It's a terrible thing, hookup culture. So bad. I know that now. I know how sacred, and I'm not going to go deep into this now, but I know how sacred now intercourse is. It's very sacred. It's an exchange of energy. And I was exchanging energy with everybody. And when you do that, you take on their energy, you take on their emotions. And I had no idea. And so I got caught in the hockey culture of trying to sleep with as many women as you can. And I know how bad that is and how toxic that is now. And so I'm trying now to be a positive male role model for the younger generation to stop watching porn, stop getting involved with the hookup culture. It is terrible. So many people out there think that a man can get as many women as he wants. That is not a man. How can one man get one woman and keep one woman? That is the ultimate test, in my opinion, of what a man actually is. And so, again, at Northeastern, all of this stuff was happening. And again, all of this stuff would come up, and I had to push it away. But what I know now is that what you push away, you are inviting to stay. I was pushing away my emotions. I was pushing them down and pushing them down, pushing them down. No different than if you've got a beach ball, right? And you push it down into a pool of water or the ocean, right? The tension, the energy is going to build until boom, it pops. And that's exactly what would happen with me. I would have a lot of emotional swings. I was a happy drunk until I got blacked out. And then a lot of stuff would start happening. I was always the one to be able to joke, but at some point it became too much. And then I would lash out at my teammates, never physically, always verbally. And so again, this was all happening at the Division One level. At the Division One level, how much better could I have been if I didn't participate in this stuff? How much better could I have been if I would have began my healing journey earlier? I know now it's all purposeful. I wasn't supposed to heal back then. I was supposed to go through these years of darkness and then do the work to pour light and love on the internal darkness that I experienced. And it's still there. I've got light, I've got dark, I've got everything in between. But I'm doing the work now to free myself from the darkness. And I'll still experience it most likely for the rest of my life. I don't feel as though we're all going to get there all the way. We're not going to fully heal. It's a never ending journey, but it's the most powerful one we can go on. And I know that in regards to physical injuries, you go, you break a leg, you tear an MCL, separate your shoulder, you require surgery, and the doctor tells you in 6 weeks, you're going to be able to get back into the gym. In 6 weeks, you're going to be able to start skating again. In 6 months. So with this comes the light at the end of the tunnel. But when it comes to our minds and healing from past traumas or just past experiences, I want people to know that there is no light at the end of the tunnel. The light is in the work. So it's in your willingness to do the work consistently enough to free yourself from the mental prison that you've been living in for so long. I lived in a mental prison. I didn't know. I wasn't in a physical prison. I was in a prison up here. And my preferences in life were calling the shots. All the subconscious stuff was calling the shots. And like I said earlier, I went through 3 years of very intense talk therapy. And again, it helped me to create a different level of understanding about myself, about where my pain came from. But what it wasn't doing, guys, is it wasn't freeing me from the emotional energy I still had attached to those experiences, to those memories, to those emotions attached to my years from the age of 5 to 7. It took me getting divorced in 2017 as I was now over in Europe playing. Married at the time when I left for that season, 2 beautiful children. The years prior to that, my then wife, Annie, I'm so grateful for her, have so much love for her. It was her that believed in me, saw the potential in me, that ultimately led me towards the path of healing, opposed to the continued path of self destruction. Prior to that season in 2017, she really struggled in being over in Europe. The year prior, we were in the Czech Republic. And at that time, I didn't understand. I wasn't aware of the power that I possessed. And I brought my personal pain in the game of hockey home. I didn't know how to detach from life at the rink and then life at home. So I would bring. It was a struggle that season. I didn't have the season personally that I wanted to have, and I didn't particularly care for my time in the Czech Republic outside of going to Prague. But my teammates, everybody hated each other. It was a foreign Eastern European city. There wasn't much English being spoken, and so it was just a very challenging time. And again, I was never abusive. I would have emotional outbursts at times, but my wife and my kids could see that bubbly, positive, happy person was starting to dwindle. And so because of that, we got home that summer and she said, "Jake, I can't go back to Europe. I'm not going back. You have a choice to make. You have a choice to make to continue going over there, but I need you to understand you're going over alone without me and the kids, or you can stay here with us and get a normal job." All I've known for my whole life was hockey. And so getting a normal job, I don't even know what the heck that would be. I've only ever had one normal job as a car salesman, and that sucked the soul straight out of me. So I didn't want to do that. And so then I made the choice. Okay, I'm going to go over alone. Oh, was that a challenge? I've been through a lot of difficult stuff in my life, but being away from my children for 9 months in 3 consecutive years, 9 months at a time, that's probably the most challenging thing I've ever gone through. I love my kids so much. I'm deeply connected with my kids, and to understand the importance of a male influence in their life and how I wasn't really able to be that for them in those formidable years, it's still, I still carry a little bit of guilt there, a little bit of shame. I'm working on that, getting emotional because I just love my kids so much. Anyhow, I went over there by myself. And I'll never forget, and I've shared this a lot, that year as I was packing to go over, my wife Annie had bought a book for herself that she never read. I know now she bought that book for me unconsciously, knowing what was going to be coming 3 months down the road when she decided she didn't want to be with me any longer. That book has forever changed my life, forever changed the relationship I have with my mind, with my thoughts, and then therefore with my life. And that book is called The Untethered Soul. Michael Singer is the author. Thank you, Michael Singer. for writing that book. It was so profound, and I really understood it, really processed it. And it was that book that got me into understanding the incredible power we have, the incredible power that we are as human beings in regards to self healing. So, again, I did the 3 years of talk therapy. I was still a prisoner up here. Now, getting into self healing, I was actually able to heal from the energy within my body, the emotions that were stuck within my body that were, again, directly attached to the abuse that I experienced. And so now I'm actually healing. Now I'm freeing myself from that pent up energy that I continued to push down and push down and push down. Instead of doing that, instead of that year, I didn't hardly drink at all. I didn't smoke at all. Every now and then I would do the chewing tobacco, but the more I was willing to just go in and face myself and sit with the inner flames, the part of me that needed those substances to feel okay started to go away, started to be healed. Again, that was the darkness, and my willingness to just go back to the experiences as a child for long enough mentally to allow the energy to start moving, then I realized, oh, I can feel this. It's okay to feel this. I don't need to reach for the bottle. I don't need to reach for the joint. I don't need to open up that tin of chewing tobacco. I don't need to eat to numb and suppress these emotions that want to come up. I'm just going to sit with it. I'm going to, again, use my mind visually to go back to the bathroom where so many things were happening, go to the bedroom where so many things were happening and relive it. Bring the memory to bring up the emotion. And once I was there, again, I just sat with it, breathing, 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 sat with the pain, sat with the pain. And again, I gave it space to move, move, move and get out. And that's what I believe true healing is. I didn't need any thing. I have it all. I have that power. We all have that power, in my opinion. We just have to be willing to go to those places within our psyche, within our bodies. The Body Keeps the Score is a book as well that everybody should be reading. And how I knew it was working, this wasn't at that time, this wasn't anything that I had learned about up until that point. Thank you, God, for providing me with this blessing, for providing me with this gift to know that if I want to free myself truly, I got to go back to the experiences. I've got to go relive them. And that's exactly what I was doing. Now I understand what that stuff is called as I began to learn more about it. But again, without an understanding, without the learning, it's like I just knew. And how I knew ultimately, guys, that it was working is because I went back to my childhood home. I sat myself down in that bathroom. I sat myself down in that room and I did the exact same thing. I brought up the memories to bring up the energy, but the energy stopped. There was no energy. There was no emotion behind the visuals. That's how I knew it was working. That's how I knew I was freeing myself from the pain of my childhood, from the pain of such deeply rooted dysfunction. On one side of my family, alcoholics. On the other side of my family, sexual abuse. Both are cycles. And I'm so grateful that I got to experience these things, that the cycles got to come to me. Because what do I get to be now? The cycle breaker. That is the most powerful thing that I get to experience in my life. And because I'm doing the work now and have been doing the work consistently now for the last 7 years, guess where that cycle doesn't bleed onto? It doesn't bleed onto my kids. That, thank you, God, that has been the biggest blessing to me. The biggest gift that I get to give my kids is that they don't have to grow up with the pain and the fear. Of course, they're still going to experience stuff. I know that. I can't stop everything, but I get to stop this. I get to continue the work so that I don't bleed the cycle onto my children. And again, that is everything to me. I've sacrificed so much in my life as a parent, so much opportunity to go continue playing, to go and make more money. But what I didn't have growing up is a positive male role model. I didn't have that. Wasn't coming from my father, wasn't coming from my brothers, wasn't coming from anybody. And so all I've wanted to do now as a parent is to just be with my kids. My mom was always gone. My father was always drunk. So I didn't have anybody. I had people around me, but nobody was protecting me because everybody was clouded through their own pain. And I know now that if my kids were to ever experience something like I did, there's going to be signs. There's going to be emotions that they're going to show that if I'm clouded through suppression, if I'm clouded because I'm drunk, if I'm clouded because I'm high, if I'm clouded because I'm eating terrible food, I won't be able to see those signs. I won't be able to perceive their emotions. And so prior to ending drinking, I had vowed to never drink in front of my kids. I made that vow. And I'm so proud of that. And I'm so proud of the fact that I gave up drinking. I don't count how long because I realized in the beginning that when I was doing that counting, I was a victim to the numbers, no different than I was a victim to the abuse that I experienced. And so, ooh, some heavy stuff, powerful stuff. I don't know exactly where I was going with all of that, but again, I love my kids so much. And again, it's a blessing that I get to be the man today that I am, get to be that positive light for them. Of course, I still have my struggles, but what I've learned from my kids is the power that they give me in regards to unconditional love. Children, especially at their ages, are the closest thing to God, the closest thing to God. And what I mean by that is that our children haven't been hardened quite yet. I was hardened very young, but I know that's not true for everyone. But our kids give us that unconditional love. They have the ability to be in the present moment. That is such a challenge for us as adults because we have all of our lived experiences that have caused a lot of pain, regardless of if you have experienced trauma like I have. In my opinion, if we have parents, we have experienced trauma. Just it's different than the thing that is the sore thumb. I have a sore thumb trauma that I experienced for those 2 years. Sexual abuse. Some people, it's physical abuse, emotional abuse. For other people, what it is their realities being denied. Like I talked about earlier, when we were kids, when we would start experiencing emotions, because our parents weren't able to regulate themselves, they had to deny our reality, shut us down so that they can feel okay. And when that's done consistently, how is that not trauma? How is that not programming us and teaching us as adults that when we experience emotions, we have to shut it down? We have to suck it up. We have to go suck it up with the booze or something to distract ourselves. So that, in my opinion, is trauma as well. And I would be willing to bet a lot of money that so many adults out there that don't have that sore thumb have that exact experience right there. And so it's about reparenting. We got to reparent ourselves. Nonetheless, I don't know how long this has even gone. I know that that's irrelevant. I think that can be it for this first episode. Again, that is heavy for anybody out there listening. If you want to be able to protect your energy in the face of somebody else sharing their stuff, if you want to create a safe space for your spouse, for your children, for your friends, for your coworkers, for a random stranger that needs to use you to get stuff out, you can do that with your breath. That's how you can observe and not absorb. That's how you can have empathy, not sympathy. We don't want to have sympathy because when we have sympathy, we take on that energy and it is no longer a safe space. We need to have empathy. Empathy. I can empathize with you, but I'm not going to feel what you're going to feel because if I feel what you're feeling, then it's no longer safe for you. And we will pick up on that energetically. We are energetic beings. We sense things, even though we don't know how to conceptualize it. We don't know, maybe we don't understand it. Maybe we don't know how to explain the fact that, man, I could feel that person's energy, right? Think about this really quick before we go. We've all experienced that person, that friend, that whoever that came and emotionally dumped onto us. They left that conversation, regardless of what they were sharing, they left that conversation feeling lighter because they got the energy out. Because we didn't know how to protect our own energy and create that safe space, we took on their energy and we leave that conversation feeling so heavy. Gosh, that was exhausting being in that conversation. Man, I feel so, ugh. That's it right there. So if you don't want to participate in that, tongue on the roof of your mouth and get into deep belly breathing. That's how you protect it. Anyhow, thank you all so much for this episode, for your willingness to tune in to the RAV podcast under the SportsEpreneur platform. Thank you again to Eric, to Scott, to Chris, to Julian. I love you all. Raw, authentic, and vulnerable. Not every episode, just so you guys know, will go that deep, will not be that heavy. I intend on just having normal, everyday people come on if they choose to just, again, understand that you don't need to be a professional athlete. You don't need to be a super successful businessman to come and join me. I want those people too, yes, but I want more people that, through the perception of this society, even though it's a toxic perception, there's a superiority thing going on out there where if a person only makes $20,000 a year, or the janitor or the custodian, these people aren't worthy of love. Yes, they are. These people don't have a voice. Yes, they do have a voice. And it's people that are perceived to be higher that continue to keep the people that are perceived to be lower, even though there is no such thing. That's all unconscious, egotistical crap. We need these people to have a voice. They have a voice. They've just been tuned out because of what they do. And I need everybody to understand that what you do is not who you are. That's going to be it for now. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 1 of season 2 of the RAV podcast on SportsEpreneur. Like, subscribe, follow, share as much as you possibly can to continue getting people to understand the importance of being vulnerable, the powerful seat of vulnerability, and how it can help you to set yourself free to live a more positive, loving, light-filled, abundant life. Thank you all. I'll see you next episode. Stay grateful.